Stefan, and thank you for having me back, and good to see you all. It was my fourth visit to Gaza. I think I briefed you also on at least one of my previous visits. The last one was during the ceasefire in February. I visited the north, Gaza City, and I spent time also with our teams in Deir el-Balah in the south, and also the parts of Khan Yunis where there is still possible for us to move around. And the short of my takeaway is basically that it's worse than I've ever seen it before. The situation is worse than I've ever seen it before, and it's from two sides. One, the needs, the humanitarian needs, have never been higher, but also our ability to respond and to assist had never been more constrained. And let me begin with the situation. Starvation is spreading. We had a formal IPC report a few weeks ago already, pointing to the entire population being acutely food insecure and 500,000 people in starvation. And since then, certainly, it hasn't gotten better. If anything, it's much worse now. Malnutrition is surging. You might have seen the numbers from UNICEF, 90,000 children now in urgent need of treatment for malnutrition. 1 in 3 people in Gaza go for days without eating, and I met many of those families who told me that there are days that their children are not eating at all, but the days where they are eating, it's often a hot soup they get from us with just a few lentils or a few pieces of pasta, so certainly not enough. And I had mothers telling me how they're trying to have kids not play so that they don't draw more energy than that they're able to provide them with through food. I mean, I think it's important also to point to the displacement situation. You know, I've said before that, you know, I've met families who've moved maybe 2-3 times. You know, now it's a situation where I meet families who have moved 2-3 times in the past 10 days. They've moved 20 or 30 times. And obviously every time they are able to bring less, and the margins to survive become slimmer. And I think the fact, I mean, Stefan, you updated on that, the fact that people are now dying every day trying to get food, I think it's the starkest illustration of how desperate the situation is. But secondly, also our ability to respond, to assist as humanitarians have never been more constrained. Of course, it was more constrained during the 80 days we were not able to get anything in, but in terms of having some assistance in and being able to operate, I've never seen the situation like it is now. And the first issue is obviously the amount that we are able to bring in. It's just a fraction of what's needed. For a period after that blockade was lifted, we were able to maybe do 20-30 trucks per day. I mean, that's far from enough, and it has driven up the prices of any basic commodity. When I was on the ground last week, the price of a kilo of wheat flour was over $25. But also the levels of desperation that I spoke to that is really triggered. And so the amounts are just a fraction. The operating environment also for our teams is just impossible. Some 85% now of the territory, there is active military operations. Our teams get stuck in waiting for clearances and at checkpoints, often spending between 15 to 20 hours straight in their armed vehicles, trying to escort our convoys. There's not enough fuel. There is not enough spare parts to our vehicles. Most of the windows in our armored vehicles have been damaged, and we don't have basic communication. Radio antennas from our cars have been ripped off, and so if you are more than 20 meters away from each other, we don't have proper communication, and that is really an issue when you are in this kind of environments. Our national staff, obviously, who are living in the midst of this crisis, are the true heroes here in terms of getting up every day and doing their work. So that's the overall situation. Now, we have been actively engaging with the Israeli authorities over the past few weeks I was there, I met with them at different levels. There were some agreements in terms of improving the condition. They hear us that what we're doing now cannot continue. There were commitments around volumes, around faster movements, around not having IDF present when we move our convoys or through our distributions, our ability to do direct distribution with different kinds of poor food partials were recognized, and also the fact that we need some of these basic equipments to do our work. And the similar commitments were then more formally made also to the EU, as was noted during the briefing earlier. Now, obviously, the proof is in the pudding. We need now to see delivery and implementation on those commitments, and so far we have not seen enough progress. Today, though, we were allowed to deliver through the north, so through Sikkim, for the first time in several days, and I think that's a key issue. So it's not only about getting enough volumes, but it's also to be able to get in through the north, because in the north we are able to deliver in a more orderly way. Obviously, in the north there has been issues with armed elements interfering, and so we've been very clear that that is unacceptable. But we want to be able to deliver in the north, because we think that is the way to also help bring down the levels of desperation and prices. But obviously, I mean, regardless of this progress that we have seen, or the minor progress in terms of commitments, at least, not so much on the implementation yet, I mean, it's not going to be enough to turn the tide of hunger. That's for sure. So what we really need is the ceasefire, and I don't know how to express that in clear enough terms, but the ceasefire is urgent. You saw us last time around. During those 42 days we were able to facilitate more than 8,000 trucks. We opened 25 bakeries, we had hundreds of soup kitchens, we delivered food packages to over 1.5 million people, and we stocked up our warehouses so that when the blockade came we were able to continue operations for almost half the time, 40 to 50 days. We are ready to do that again. We have enough food on the borders to deliver to the entire population for some 2 months. But obviously we need that ceasefire, and we need conditions within that ceasefire, and I think that's important. There was last time around a humanitarian protocol. I would imagine that there is again going to be a humanitarian protocol, and it's important that the provision in that protocol allows for all routes to open up: Jordan, Egypt, of course, Ashdod, Israel, but also that there are multiple entry points into Gaza, the north, the south, the center. And obviously inside Gaza there needs to be the secured environment for us to deliver. That was not an issue last time around, but obviously since then we have seen an increasingly fragmented security environment. So it's unclear to us exactly what that environment would look like should there be a ceasefire. But those are important elements also for successfully then be able to take advantage and deliver to the entire population. I think I'll end there, and I look forward to any questions.
Great, thank you. We'll take some questions from Carl, and I realize there's some still questions I have to take online after, but let's deal with Carl first. So Edie, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skau. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, welcome. We always appreciate your briefings. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. Could you expand on your contacts with the Israelis, and in the face of what you say is growing starvation and deaths, what their reaction is in terms of such limited commitments to allow both food and fuel into Gaza? And can you tell us whether there are any bakeries operating anywhere in Gaza today?
Please, Carl.
Okay. No, thank you for those questions. I mean, I won't go into detail, obviously, on conversations with the authorities, but I sense the recognition that the conditions need to improve. And as I said, there were commitment on a number of points and demands that we had to deliver. We have yet to see full implementation of that, for sure. but it was also recognized that the UN has a key role to play. I think there were rumors of the UN being pushed out, but it was very clear in my engagement that they want the UN to continue to be the main track in delivery. And certainly, should there be a ceasefire, the indications were that they would want us to be ready to scale up and do what we did last time when we, on day one, was ready to bring 600 trucks into Gaza. And so that was the message, and we have, we in return then, of course, made clear that we need better conditions in the meantime, but also we need to have all routes open and all entry points open should the expectation be on us to deliver at that level again. So I think that in some way was reassurance. But again, we haven't seen that materializing on the ground in full yet. We had progress today about being able to move into the north, but that needs to be every day. I mean, we need at least 100 trucks moving in of food, I'm saying only, from WFP, moving in every day, and a minimum of half of that, 50, should go in through the north, because that is the way that we could help try to stabilize the situation, bring desperation levels down and the prices down. But again, it is not enough by any means to meet the full needs. We need a complete different scale. We need to massively scale up, and that could probably only happen should there be a ceasefire. You asked about bakeries. Yeah, none of our bakeries are up and running. And partly that is because the owners of those bakeries are not comfortable to open up with the levels of desperation we now see. Should we be able to reach with 1 or 2 truckloads, including with some oil and some fuel, the pressure on that bakery would probably be such that it will be quite chaotic in those distributions. So the owners have indicated that unless there is we can take the temperatures down, they are not ready. If there is any other bakery of any kind, that I can't speak to, but certainly I didn't see any when I was moving around last week.
Ibtisam?
Thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim, Al-Arabi Al-Jadid newspaper. I have first very quick follow-ups. You talked about the amount of food that you need, but I'm wondering also regarding the quality of food, if you are allowed to bring in the food you need, and also you talked about the basic equipment that you need and you don't have. If you could elaborate on that. And then my question is, if you could walk us through some conversations you had with people there on the ground, with Gazans, your colleagues, or things you saw in this visit. Thank you.
Okay, on the variety of commodities or quality of food, I think it's an important question. When we first were allowed to come in after the blockade, we were told only to bring wheat flour. Again, we pushed back on that, but at the end we accepted because we also couldn't say no to try every opportunity to provide for the people. But that's obviously not good enough, and so we have now insisted that we have a broader variety, and including ready-to-eat food partials, so that we can deliver directly to people, and that has been accepted as part of this broader package, and we have been able on our convoys now to have that kind of commodities. But frankly, for people to survive, we need to go beyond that. There needs to be also fresh vegetables and fruits, which we cannot provide, but will need to come from private sector. Currently, there is nothing going in from our private sector, and in my previous visits, there has been some markets open. I didn't see any of that now. There were a few bags of potatoes in some street corners. That's the only kind of market that I see during my visit. On the basic equipments, I mean, the list is quite long, but as I said, we need the basics for our vehicles. Currently, we are basically putting pieces. We have maybe 2 vehicles that are half functioning, and so we're taking tires or spare parts from one to put on the other so that we can have one functioning. The same goes for generators, that we have 2 that are not fully functional, so we are taking spare parts from one to try to fix the others. That's kind of the creative way of trying to get by here. But on the communication equipment, for example, and damages to that, there is no fix inside, and so we need to be able to bring in the basics for our operations to run. And as I explained, our staff is under such pressure that we need to be able to provide that basic infrastructure for them. And it goes beyond, frankly. We are not able to bring enough food even into our staff and the variety that any kind of basic condition for running such an operation would normally require. On the people, I mean, when I was there in February, it was quite heartening to see that there was such hope back, and that people had, despite the fact that they came back to houses or buildings that were, completely destroyed, and where there was, quite unlikely anyone you couldn't really repair, they were happy to be back. They had put up or patched up a tent on top of that destroyed house or building, or just fixed some walls with curtains or something else, and that there was even some element of normalcy that had returned on the street with kids playing with balls, but obviously that's all gone now, and there is this sense of resignment or or lack of hope, I would say, and frankly of desperation. I was seeing women. Speaking to women in one of these tent camps on the beach in northern Gaza. I mean, it's remarkable to look out through that beach in northern Gaza, because it's completely covered now with shelter from the waterfront, basically. And I can imagine that if there's wind overnight, some of those waves would hit those first rows of tents. It's completely covered. You can almost walk around. But sitting down on the floors and speaking to those women, they were speaking about, as I explained before, they are telling their kids not to play. Of course, they speak about the frustration and the anger their husbands and their sons have, which also generate, conditions in the family that are not easy. And they were talking about going and standing in queues to these soup kitchens and coming back, sometimes with nothing, and sometimes with just, a bucket of some warm water, basically, with some pieces of pasta. And so, conditions that are worse than they'd ever experienced. And these are often well-educated, very strong women, and it's just disheartening to hear their stories. So, yeah, I overall also the atmospherics, the environment really is more serious than I've ever seen it before. And obviously they live in, these bubbles, basically one in the north and one in the south, with huge restrictions on movements as well.
Bisan and Benny.
Oh, thank you very much, Bisan. I'm quick with Al Jazeera. So you mentioned that in conversations that you've been having with authorities that there is a sense of recognition that conditions need to improve and that the UN is not being pushed out. But with the establishment of the GHF, and we've seen how that played out, I mean, definitely the impression from anyone watching from the outside or following what's happening is that actually the UN is being pushed out. So if you can elaborate a little bit more on that, and how do you see that play out in the case of a ceasefire being agreed to?
Well, I can only speak to what they told me, and GHF did not come up in those conversations, was that they wanted the UN to continue to be the main track for delivery, especially should there be a ceasefire, and they asked us to be ready to scale up. And so what that means for anyone else, that I can't speak to. I mean, it's clear that we have two completely different approaches. As I explained, when I'm in Gaza City, I can walk around. I move around the shelters. I sit on the floors and speak to women. That's the way that we work, and that's the way we deliver, because that's also a way for us to make sure that the food that we deliver reaches the most vulnerable, and that there is no diversion or interference. And so we need to safeguard that relationship with the communities and the security we draw from that trust we have with the communities.
Benny?
So I'm sure that in your conversation with the Israelis, you've heard that they say, and you touched on it in your opening remarks, that they say that a lot of the food that is being delivered is being confiscated by Hamas and used for Hamas's goals, including selling it to make money and recruitments and so on. So what's your take on that? Also, What is, in your view, the contribution, if at all, of the GHF to the situation to the food shortages?
On your second question, I have nothing really to add. I don't know enough to be able to speak to that. On your first, it's interesting. Over the first 19 months of this conflict and our operation, we have basically been targeting some 1 million people. There are months when we have managed to deliver to 1 million people. There are many months that frustratingly we have not been able to do so. Never in our engagement with the Israeli authorities has diversion or interference by Hamas been an issue. We have had 2 incidents some 12 months ago where we reported that to partners, to member states, and to the Israelis, and we took action and we mitigated risks for that to happen again. It was only towards the end of this blockade when this became an issue in the conversation, and we brought then to the table proposals of ways how that can be mitigated. I mean, we work in many complex environments. We have many years of experience, and so we have ways of trying to avoid the risk for that to happen. There's never been any evidence put to us that has happened in any systematic way in the past. It could have been for others, I don't know, but I'm speaking here for WFP and for the UN. So it's kind of a newly introduced issue, and I have so far not seen the evidence that this has happened. We are obviously watching what can happen in the future and taking mitigating measures. But as I said before, I think the fact that we are present in the communities, that we have third-party monitoring, that we speak directly to the beneficiaries is for us the best assurance to make sure that it reaches. Now, when there is less food, there are less actors. Obviously, there might be a risk that there is more pressure also on the World Food Programme, but that has not been the case so far. And frankly, in my conversations last week, this was not a center piece of those discussions.
So could you just detail a little bit of those mitigating measures that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we have beneficiary lists that we decide on, and we have then, when we distribute, a system. And because what's unique also about Gaza is that everyone, despite the fact that they moved 20 to 30 times, has an ID, and so we are able to keep track of who gets what and when, and so that we also avoid duplication of efforts. We also distribute as close as possible to the communities, because we know there can be risk for diversion before we reach the communities. But once you have handed that box of food over to the mother, there is clearly not the same risk that anyone would try to put their hands on that box of food. And we have third-party monitoring, that we have an independent view on what's going on. And again, I mean, there are many eyes and ears over Gaza. I mean, there is a buzz of drones most places I walk around, and so should there be a big issue around that, I'm sure there would be evidence to put forward as well, and that has not been put forward to us so far. But again, we don't take this lightly, because there is always the risk, and we need to always make sure that we are making everything possible to avoid any diversion. But our food needs to go to those most vulnerable, and we are determined to do everything we can to make sure it does.
Let's go to the back. Ahmed Ali. Go.
Thank you so much, Mr. Skau, for the briefing and all the important work you do. My name is Ahmed Ali with Sphinx News TV. I'd like to ask specifically about the treatment of Palestinian civilians by Israeli soldiers. Based on your time on the ground, could you describe in some detail how interactions typically unfold between the two parties? To the extent that your role and mandate allow, how are Israeli soldiers treating Palestinian civilians? Thank you.
Well, as far as I know, there is no direct engagement. I mean, I think we've seen incidents when civilians, when there has been encounters, and there has unfortunately been many incidents of that. But that's not anything I've seen or know about. But and as far as I know, there is not that direct engagement between the IDF and the civilian population. But there are others to speak to that. That's not our mandate, and nothing I have anything to add to on.
Magdalena, Nizar, then Deji. Okay. Nizar, then Deji. Go ahead, Nizar. No, go ahead.
You mentioned that there are food in the market sold at exuberant prices. How do they get that food? Where does it come from?
I mean, now, as I said, our teams and exactly how they do that have now, estimated that the black market price for wheat flour is around $25 to $30 per kilo. When I was there, I did not see any markets open. In the previous visits I have seen, and often then it's been tomatoes or anything that can be grown inside. But there was also a period when there were quite some substantial commercial goods coming in, and then you could see also more fresh produce on those markets. But right now, I didn't see any markets open, and as I explained, what I did see was some bags of potatoes, and exactly how they had entered, I don't know. There is a minimum, I think, production inside. I don't know. I don't imagine that the potatoes came from there, but of tomatoes, of some other basic goods. But the volumes are, of course, minimum because the production capacities has been completely destroyed.
It has been reported that some groups, some armed groups, which are affiliated with the Israelis, have some access to such food, and they are selling them in the market. Have you seen anything that supports this?
That's not a thing I have any information about.
Deji, and then we'll go online.
Yes, Mr. Skau, CCTV 徐德志. Our viewers, some of them, they watched the TV and saw this situation in Gaza. Some of them said those people are running. How can you tell that they have humanitarian need for food? How you've been there for several times, and what is your observation? What can we tell our viewers about those images? And secondly, because we know that now the WFP operation capacity has been limited. If there's a ceasefire, you said you have enough food for 2 months for all Gazan people. Do you have the capacity to even expand your operation in a very short time? Thank you.
Well, the second question is quite easy. Yes, we have that capacity. We have the capacity, we have the systems, and we have the commodities. What we would need to do quickly is to procure more wheat flour, because that's a commodity that we can't have sitting for too long. So we have not had that procured with the risk of being spoiled. But we are quite sure that we could do that and do that procurement in the proximity of in the region. So we are ready, as I said, to scale up to the entire population for at least 2 months, and we can do it from tomorrow should there be a breakthrough. What we do need, though, is to have all corridors open: Egypt, Jordan, the West Bank, Ashdod, and we need multiple entry points inside, and we need to be able to move from those entry points to the communities. I think that's important as well. But in terms of capacity systems and available commodities, that's not the bottleneck here. I mean, certainly, the images and the stories I get from my teams also in terms of encountering these massive crowds of young people, that's not the way that we want to do our distributions by any means. But as I explained, I think with the current levels of desperation, it's very hard to avoid. I'm quite confident that the majority of these young people who are pulling these bags off our trucks, are doing that for their own purposes, maybe for the purposes of their families. But it's obviously not, we cannot exclude that there is some reselling happening, given also the prices of commodities. What we have not seen now is that kind of organized crime that we saw a few months ago. It's not like there are gangs that show up and do this in an organized way. We have seen that there can be arms or armed elements within those crowds, but that's also can be explained that many more civilians now have arms by themselves, and so some of the incidents of shooting in the crowds can also be that there are fights between different individuals, given the chaotic situation that is there. But so it's not an organized criminal. It is desperate young civilians largely. Having said that, that's not how we want to do deliveries. We want to bring in volume so we can take down the levels of desperation, that we can bring down the prices, and so that we can do the orderly distribution that we usually do, that I explained, where people show up, you know, the women and the children make it to the front of the queue. We have them registered, and we can ensure also that everyone get enough and that there is no duplication of distributions or efforts.
Thank you. We have time for 2 quick questions online. Michelle, then Stefano, please. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, Michelle, go ahead.
Oh, you know this won't be quick, Steph. Thanks for the briefing. Just a quick follow-up to start. You mentioned potatoes. You saw potatoes in a market in Gaza. Where was that, and where do you think the potatoes came from?
I don't know, and it was in Gaza City. But small commodity, I just want to speak to, you know, what I really see. I think in the past, and this was street corner, kind of, you know, someone putting up a small table and selling a few kilos of potatoes. I don't know where that came from, and it's certainly not in large amounts. But I wanted to just say that, you know, there's it's not nothing either, but it's certainly very minimal, and I'm not aware exactly where it could have come from.
Okay, and then a second question. You mentioned that there was 2 incidents, I think, of aid diversion by Hamas that you spoke about 12 months ago and notified people. The GHF posted on X yesterday that convoys are being looted daily. They didn't say by Hamas, but they said UN and WFP convoys are being looted daily. Trucks are routinely seized by Hamas or swarmed by armed gangs. When the food doesn't make it through, Hamas controls who gets it and who doesn't. Can you give us a response to that? Like, how bad? I know you've spoken a little bit already about it, but like, is the looting occurring daily, and has that happened throughout the war?
It's been, I mean, it's been very different throughout the war. You know, we said for a while that this is a new operation every 3 months. Then we started talking about this is a new operation every month. Frankly, now I think it's a week-to-week or almost a day-to-day kind of operation. So you know, that's the conditions we have now. I mean, since the opening following the blockade in the south, we have so far not been able to do distribution at the distribution points as intended. It's all been distributions along the way, some more orderly than others. In the north, we have been able to do distributions in an orderly way, and that's why we're so keen and insisting that we can continue to do the north and to scale up the volumes in the north, because we think that is a way of orderly then bringing down the levels of need and the price levels. In the north, we had, as I alluded to, an incident also some 10 days ago with some armed element interfering with our convoy. It's not clear who and why and how. And we have made very clear that that's unacceptable, and we will continue to monitor that as we now resume distributions in the north very carefully. But I think the bottom line again here is that we need to massively scale up quickly. That would help us provide in a much more orderly way and make sure that we reach the most vulnerable. We are by no means trying to downplay the challenge. The situation as it is now is near to impossible and cannot continue. We need a ceasefire, and short of that, we need to dramatically and substantially improve the conditions, and not least get more volumes into Gaza.
Thank you. Stefano, if I could ask you to make an effort and ask a short question.
I will try, Steph. Well, thank you for your briefing. You are diplomats, we are journalists, and we have to distinguish between propaganda, the one that is a war, whoever speaks there for Israel or Hamas or whatever, we have to distinguish what is propaganda. So from you, we account on the fact that you, speaking from the UN, and what you just say and the facts that you say are truth. So my question is, first, why, I mean, I know you're a diplomat, but why there is not some adjective there? Shameful. You talk about children be starving, if I understand. So somebody say that it's not true, somebody say that it's true. Well, is it true or not? If it's true, shouldn't you have shamefully or something that these children are starving? And then my question is, at the moment, we're talking a lot about this report that Francesca Albanese did, okay? And wherever you turn, somebody say there's propaganda, anti-Semitism, somebody say that it's true. My question is to you, did you read it? And what do you think? I don't want the answer that usually is, oh, everybody's free to say what they think. No. Do you agree with the situation she describes, or you don't agree?
I'm not sure I can comment on that. I'm so focused on our operations that I don't follow all the discussions around Gaza. But what I can say that we are determined to be objective and facts-based. That's the only way for us to make sure that we maintain our credibility and our voice. And so you can count on WFP to always be facts-based and objective. And I think we have a role to play because of the fact that we are always on the front lines, whether it's in Sudan, Yemen, or in Gaza, and we will be telling that truth regardless of how inconvenient it may be. I referred to 90,000 children being malnourished. These are stats that UNICEF has published. I was careful to say that there were weeks ago now that the IPC report was issued that pointed to the entire population being acutely food insecure and almost 500,000 in the starvation category. Because we want to stick to information that is verified. As you know, the IPC review is done by a number of actors and according to a well-established protocol with scientifically proven methods. And so, just as you alluded to, with this information battle ongoing, it's important for us to stick to that. And that report stands. We have not had an update since, but what I know is that there has not been enough food. It's been far from enough food entering Gaza since then. And so we certainly expect that the situation is even worse now.